The whole family laughed at the inheritance my grandfather left me, but within a few years they regretted it. The day my grandfather Henry died was the hottest day of the summer in our small Colorado town. Sweat trickled down my back as I stood at his grave, my cheap black suit feeling like a portable sauna. But the discomfort didn't matter. What mattered was that the man who had always believed in me was gone. While I was genuinely grieving, I couldn't help but notice how my relatives were already whispering about the will. My Uncle John, with his expensive watch glinting in the sunlight, kept checking his phone. My cousin Tom was schmoozing with Grandpa's old friends, probably trying to score points with potential business connections. It was obvious they were just waiting for the funeral to be over, so they could get to the important part, figuring out who got what. I'm Alex, by the way, 34 years old and proud owner of Alex's Auto Shop on Main Street. Nothing fancy, just honest work fixing cars for honest people. The kind of job that makes your hands permanently stained with motor oil but keeps food on the table. The kind of job my family looks down on. Such a waste of potential, Aunt Martha would say at every Thanksgiving dinner, not even bothering to lower her voice. You could have gone to college like Tom. Yeah, Tom with his business degree and his startup that has been about to take off for the past 5 years while Dad keeps funding it. But Grandpa Henry never saw it that way. He'd visit my shop, sit on my beat-up office chair, and tell me how proud he was that I built something with my own 2 hands. You fix things, Alex, he'd say. Most people in this world just break them. After the ceremony, this slick-looking guy in a suit approached me. Turned out he was Grandpa's lawyer, Mr. Hoffman. He pulled me aside while everyone was heading to their cars. Alexander, he said, all formal and stiff, your grandfather asked me to give you this personally. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. Below was a strange phrase, "The land knows more than it shows." I wanted to open it right there, but Uncle John was already honking his horn, signaling it was time to head to his place for the family meeting. So I stuffed the envelope in my jacket pocket, promising myself I'd read it later when I was alone. Uncle John's McMansion was exactly what you'd expect from someone who needs everyone to know he's successful. Oversized, overdecorated, and over the top. His living room was bigger than my entire apartment, with one of those fancy gas fireplaces that nobody ever turns on and furniture that looks expensive but uncomfortable. The entire extended family had gathered there, uncles, aunts, cousins, and a few people I barely recognized who claimed to be related somehow. The air was thick with fake sympathy and real anticipation. Now that we're all here, Uncle John announced, standing in front of the fireplace like he was about to give a State of the Union address, Mr. Hoffman will read Henry's will. Mr. Hoffman cleared his throat and began reading. Grandpa had been surprisingly wealthy for someone who lived so modestly. He had investments, savings, and several properties. Most of the cash was divided pretty evenly among his 3 children. My dad, who passed away 5 years ago. So his share went to me, Uncle John, and Aunt Sarah. Then came the properties. Aunt Sarah got the family home in town. Uncle John got the vacation cabin by the lake. And then Mr. Hoffman paused, adjusting his glasses. To my grandson Alexander, I leave my 50-acre property on Eagle Mountain. The room went silent for a moment, then erupted in whispers. I sat there confused. I didn't even know Grandpa owned land on Eagle Mountain. There must be some mistake. Uncle John interrupted. That land is worthless. It's just rocks and dirt. No water access. Too steep to build on. Why would he leave that to Alex? Mr. Hoffman simply continued reading. Alex understands the value of things others overlook. The land knows more than it shows. There was again that same phrase from the envelope. I reached into my pocket, feeling the paper between my fingers. Well, that settled then. Uncle John said with a smirk once the reading was finished. Everyone started mingling, drinking the expensive whiskey John had put out. The mood lightened considerably now that the money situation was clear. I sat alone in a corner, feeling out of place as usual. My cousin Tom sauntered over, drink in hand, and that smug look on his face that made me want to check if my wallet was still in my pocket. So, Grease Monkey got himself some rocks, he snickered, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. Congratulations! You're now the proud owner of the most useless piece of land in the county. Not even weeds grow there. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Maybe you can start a collection of pretty pebbles. Or better yet, sell it to me. I'll give you $5,000 for it right now, which is about $5,000 more than it's worth. I wanted to punch his perfect teeth in, but instead, I just got up and walked away. Some of our relatives laughed. Others looked embarrassed for me. Either way, I needed air. I stepped out onto Uncle John's perfectly manicured backyard, finally opening the envelope. Inside was a letter and an old photograph. The letter was brief. Dear Alex, by now you know about the mountain property. Everyone thinks it's worthless, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Go there. See it with your own eyes. Trust what you find, not what others tell you. And remember, the land knows more than it shows. Your loving grandfather, Henry. The photograph showed a much younger grandpa standing on rocky terrain, mountains in the background. He was smiling broadly, pointing at something just out of frame. I turned the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, my secret treasure, 1976. I drove home that night with my head spinning. What did Grandpa mean? What was on that seemingly worthless land that made him so happy? Why did he specifically leave it to me? The next morning, I called my buddy Jake, who works at the county records office. Hey, man, I need to know everything about a property on Eagle Mountain. It belonged to my grandfather, Henry Mitchell. 2 hours later, I was looking at the official documents. 50 acres of steep, rocky terrain on the western slope of Eagle Mountain. No structures, no water rights noted, no easements. Just land that, according to the assessment, was unsuitable for development and valued at bare minimum for tax purposes. On paper, Tom was right. It was worthless. But Grandpa wasn't the type to play jokes, especially not from beyond the grave. He left me that land for a reason, and I was going to find out why. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. I closed the shop early on Friday, throwing some camping gear in my old pickup truck. Whatever Grandpa wanted me to find, I was determined to discover it. Maybe it was just sentimental, the place where he proposed to Grandma, or some scenic spot only he appreciated. As I pulled away from town, I couldn't help but smile thinking about Tom's smug face. Worthless land, he'd said. Well, even if it was just rocks and dirt, it was MY rocks and dirt. And somehow, deep down, I knew Grandpa wouldn't have made such a big deal about something truly worthless. The mystery in that photograph, the secret behind his cryptic message, it all waited for me on that mountain. And tomorrow, I'd finally discover what Grandpa Henry had been hiding all these years on that useless piece of land. The drive to Eagle Mountain took longer than expected. My GPS kept losing signal as I wound up the narrow mountain roads, and the last 5 miles weren't even on the map. I had to rely on the old property survey and my sense of direction, which thankfully hadn't failed me yet. By the time I reached what I thought was the edge of Grandpa's land, the sun was already high in the sky, beating down mercilessly. I parked my truck where the dirt road ended and grabbed my backpack. The property map showed 50 acres of steep terrain spreading out before me. From this vantage point, it looked exactly as advertised. Rocks, more rocks, scrubby vegetation, and not much else. Tom's mocking voice echoed in my head. Congratulations! You're now the proud owner of the most useless piece of land in the county. The climb was brutal. Loose stones shifted under my boots, sending cascades of pebbles down the slope. Sweat soaked through my t-shirt within minutes. I kept checking the old photo of Grandpa, trying to match the background with what I was seeing. After about an hour of hiking, I still hadn't found anything resembling a secret treasure. Just as I was considering taking a break, I noticed something odd, a faint trail winding between 2 large boulders. It wasn't a natural formation. Someone had deliberately cleared a path. Curiosity piqued. I followed around a rocky outcropping and then stopped dead in my tracks. The trail opened into a natural basin, hidden from view by the surrounding rocks. And there, nestled between the stones, were several pools of steaming water. Hot springs. My worthless inheritance had natural hot springs. I approached the nearest pool cautiously, testing the water with my fingers. It was hot, but not scalding, with a slight mineral smell. The water was incredibly clear. I could see colorful deposits coating the rocks beneath the surface. I was so absorbed in my discovery that I didn't hear anyone approach until a sharp voice startled me. "Excuse me, but this is a protected research area." I spun around to find myself face to face with a woman about my age, wearing hiking boots, cargo pants, and a Colorado Geological Survey t-shirt. She had her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and was looking at me with suspicious green eyes. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I think this is my land." Her eyebrows shot up. "Your land? You're Henry Mitchell's grandson." Now it was my turn to be surprised. "You knew my grandfather?" She shook her head. "Not personally, but everyone studying this mountain range knows about these springs. They're geologically unique. The mineral content is unlike anything else in the region." She frowned. "I'm Emma Winters, geologist. And you are Alex Mitchell. And yes, this property belongs to me now. My grandfather left it to me in his will." Something flashed across her face, disappointment, concern, before she composed herself. "I see. Well, Mr. Mitchell, I hope you're not planning to develop this area. These springs are scientifically valuable and environmentally sensitive." I couldn't help but laugh. "Develop? I just found out about them 5 minutes ago. Besides, my family thinks this land is worthless." "Worthless?" Emma looked genuinely offended. "That shows how little they know. These hot springs contain a rare combination of minerals formed by the unique geological conditions of this mountain." Emma reluctantly agreed to show me around, pointing out various features I would have missed. As we walked, she kept a professional distance, occasionally launching into detailed explanations about fault lines and mineral deposits that went completely over my head. But her passion was obvious. Her eyes lit up when she talked about the geology of the area. "So, what exactly brings you here today?" I asked as we circled back to the main springs. "Research for my doctoral thesis," she replied. "I've been studying these springs for the past 8 months. Your grandfather allowed me access." She gave me a pointed look. He understood the scientific importance of this place. I winced at her implication. "Look, I'm not going to kick you out. Continue your research. I'm just trying to figure out why my grandfather left me this specific property." Emma's stance softened slightly. "Henry was different from most landowners. He never interfered with my work, just asked questions sometimes. He seemed to genuinely care about understanding this place." She hesitated. "There's something special about these springs. The locals have known about them for generations, but they've kept them secret." Over the next week, I kept returning to the springs, setting up a small campsite nearby. Each day I explored further, mapping out the various pools scattered across the property. There were at least 7 distinct springs, each with slightly different temperatures and mineral compositions, according to Emma, who I ran into occasionally as she collected water samples. Our conversations remained mostly civil but cool. It was clear she viewed me as a potential threat to her research site, despite my assurances to the contrary. One evening, as I was sitting by my campfire, I noticed lights moving along the trail. Grabbing my flashlight, I went to investigate and found 3 elderly people carefully making their way toward the springs. The oldest, a man who had to be in his 80s, froze when my light hit him. "Sorry, young feller. We mean no trespass. Just came for our weekly soak." "Your weekly soak?" The elderly woman beside him nodded. "Been coming here for years. Your grandpa Henry always said we were welcome. Helps my arthritis, something fierce." The third visitor, another elderly man, spoke up. "If you're fixing to run us off, at least let Martha here have one more dip. Her joints are acting up something awful." I lowered my flashlight. "I'm not running anyone off. I'm Alex, Henry's grandson." Their faces lit up with recognition. "Well, I'll be damned," the first man exclaimed. "You're little Alex?" Henry showed us your picture. "I'm Earl. This is Martha. And that old coot is Bill. We're from Pine Hollow, just down the mountain." I helped them navigate to the springs, where they methodically set up portable chairs and towels with the efficiency of long practice. As they slipped into the warm waters with sighs of relief, Earl explained how they'd been coming here for years. Your grandpa caught us trespassing about 10 years back. Instead of getting mad, he set up these steps and handrails to make it easier for us old-timers. Said the healing waters shouldn't go to waste. Healing waters? I'd assumed the seniors just enjoyed the warm soak, but Earl spoke as if the springs had medicinal properties. When I asked, Martha enthusiastically jumped in. "Oh, honey, these aren't just any hot springs. Before I started coming here, I could barely hold a crochet needle. Now I can knit a sweater in a week. Bill's breathing improved too. His asthma used to be terrible." The next day, I drove into Pine Hollow, the small town nearest the mountain. It was your typical rural mountain community. One main street with general store, a diner, a post office, and not much else. At the diner, I ordered coffee and casually asked the waitress about the springs on Eagle Mountain. Her reaction surprised me. She immediately looked around to see if anyone was listening, then leaned in close. "You're Henry's boy, aren't you?" He was the only outsider who knew about the springs. "We don't advertise them. Too special to become some tourist trap." Throughout the day, I spoke with more locals, piecing together the story. For generations, the people of Pine Hollow had quietly used the springs for various ailments. They had an unspoken agreement to keep them secret, fearing that commercialization would destroy what made them special. I thought about the seniors I'd met, how they'd benefited from the springs, and suddenly had an idea. The next day, I drove back to town and posted a small notice in Community Center. Eagle Mountain Springs open to Pine Hollow seniors. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Transportation provided upon request. Alex Mitchell. When Emma found me installing a better handrail by the largest spring a few days later, her usual professional distance gave way to open curiosity. "What are you doing?" I showed her my simple improvements, handrails, non-slip steps, a few benches. I've invited the seniors from Pine Hollow to use the springs. Figured they could benefit the most, and they already know about this place anyway. Emma studied me with narrowed eyes, as if recalculating something. "That's actually thoughtful. Most new landowners would be figuring out how to monetize this place." I shrugged. "Money's not everything. You should have seen how much the springs helped Martha's arthritis. Besides, what good is having this place if no one benefits from it?" She sat on one of the new benches, suddenly looking less like a stern researcher and more like a tired grad student. "Your grandfather said something similar once. I just assumed when he passed away that some greedy developer would take over." I finished for her. "Well, you got a grease monkey instead. Probably not much better in your book." For the first time, Emma smiled. A genuine smile that transformed her face. I'm starting to think it might be. Over the next few weeks, Emma and I developed a tentative friendship. I'd bring coffee when I knew she'd be collecting samples, and she started explaining her research in terms I could actually understand. The seniors from Pine Hollow became regulars, and I enjoyed chatting with them as they soaked their aches and pains away. One evening, as Emma and I sat watching the sunset reflect off the pools, I asked a question that had been bugging me. What makes these springs so special? Beyond the usual hot spring stuff, I mean. Emma considered for a moment. Scientifically speaking, it's the rare mineral composition. The water passes through several unusual geological formations before reaching the surface, picking up trace elements not commonly found together. But, she hesitated. But what? The healing properties reported by the locals go beyond what science can currently explain. The mineral content is beneficial, yes, but some of the improvements people experience, they're remarkable. I thought about Martha, who now brought her knitting to the springs, her fingers moving with surprising agility. Could you help me understand more about the water? I want to make sure whatever we do here preserves what makes it special. Emma looked surprised. I hadn't meant to say it like that, but now that it was out there, well, you know more about these springs than anyone. I could use your expertise. After a thoughtful pause, Emma nodded. I'd like that. Actually, there's an old-timer in Pine Hollow we should talk to, Joseph Running Bear. His family has lived here for generations. If anyone knows the history of these springs, it's him. Joseph Running Bear lived in a modest house at the edge of Pine Hollow. At 92, he was surprisingly spry, with alert eyes and a firm handshake. When we explained our interest in the springs, he invited us onto his porch and settled into a rocking chair. "Those springs have been sacred to my people since before the white settlers came," he began. "My great-grandfather was a medicine man who understood their power. Each pool has different healing properties, one for the bones, another for the breath, a third for the heart." As the evening shadows lengthened, Joseph told us the legend of Eagle Mountain. According to tribal belief, the mountain contained a spirit that blessed the waters flowing through it. Those who approached with respect and good intentions would find healing. Those seeking to exploit the mountain would find misfortune. "Your grandfather understood this," Joseph told me. "He came here 30 years ago, planning to develop the land. But after learning the legend and experiencing the springs himself, he changed his mind. Instead, he bought the land to protect it, allowing only those who needed healing to visit." Emma and I exchanged glances. This explained why Grandpa had kept the spring secret from the family and left the land specifically to me. He must have seen something in me that made him think I would continue his stewardship. As we drove back down the mountain, Emma was unusually quiet. "Penny for your thoughts?" I prompted. "I'm just processing everything Joseph said. It aligns with what I've observed scientifically, but adds a dimension I hadn't considered." She turned to me. "What are you going to do with this knowledge?" I thought about the seniors who visited the springs, the improvements I'd already made, and the potential to help more people. "I think Grandpa left me these springs because he trusted me to follow in his footsteps, to protect them while allowing those who need healing to benefit." Emma nodded approvingly, but before she could respond, her phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, then sat up straight. "Yes, he's with me right now. Of course, we'll be there tomorrow morning." She hung up, looking excited. That was Dr. Mitchell from the Pine Hollow Clinic. "He's noticed marked improvements in several elderly patients who've been visiting your springs. He wants to talk to us about potentially conducting a proper medical study." I couldn't help but grin. Well, that would certainly add some scientific credibility to the magic healing waters. Emma rolled her eyes, but she was smiling too. "It's not magic, it's geology. But," she admitted, "there might be more to these springs than I initially thought." As we reached my truck, the sun was setting behind Eagle Mountain, casting a golden glow of supposedly worthless land my grandfather had left me. Magic or science. I was beginning to understand what Grandpa meant in his letter. The land knows more than it shows. And I had a feeling that Dr. Mitchell's interest was just the beginning of what these springs had to reveal. Dr. Mitchell's clinic in Pine Hollow was exactly what you'd expect in a small mountain town. A converted Victorian house with a weathered sign, and a small waiting room filled with outdated magazines. But the doctor himself defied expectations. In his early 40s, with a Stanford medical degree hanging on his wall, he'd chosen this remote community over lucrative city practices. "Thanks for coming," he said, ushering Emma and me into his cluttered office. The walls were lined with medical books and hiking photos. "What you've got up there on Eagle Mountain is fascinating from a medical perspective." He pulled out several patient charts, careful to keep names hidden for privacy. "These are 6 seniors who've been regularly visiting your springs. The improvements in their conditions are remarkable." Dr. Mitchell showed us before and after test results, x-rays, and mobility assessments. Martha's arthritis showed measurable improvement. Bill's lung capacity had increased by 18%. Another patient's psoriasis had almost completely cleared up. "I've been practicing medicine for 15 years, Dr. Mitchell said, leaning back in his chair. "I've never seen improvements like this without pharmaceutical intervention, especially not in patients of this age group." Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. She pulled out her own research notebook. "I've been analyzing water samples from each spring. The mineral content is extraordinary. High concentrations of lithium, selenium, and several rare earth elements, plus a unique microbial composition I haven't been able to fully identify yet." The doctor nodded enthusiastically. "That's why I called you. I'd like to conduct a proper clinical study, document the effects, analyze the mechanisms. With your permission, of course," he added, looking at me. I was still processing everything. My worthless inheritance was potentially a medical goldmine. "Of course." Whatever helps people. Over the next few weeks, my simple improvements to the springs evolved into a more organized operation. Dr. Mitchell set up a basic medical station in an old camping trailer I bought and parked on the property. Emma established a small field lab for ongoing water analysis. We created a sign-up system for the seniors, tracking their visits and health changes. Word spread through Pine Hollow, and soon we had more participants than we could handle. People with arthritis, respiratory issues, skin conditions, even some recovering from surgeries. Emma and I fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side. What started as a professional partnership gradually shifted into something more personal. I found myself looking forward to our coffee breaks, where conversations about mineral content would drift into discussions about favorite movies or childhood memories. One evening, as we were closing up the trailer after a particularly busy day, Emma mentioned how different I was from what she'd initially expected. When I heard Henry's grandson had inherited the place, I imagined some city slicker with development plans, she admitted. Not a mechanic who'd install handrails for seniors. Most people underestimate mechanics, I replied with a grin. We're problem solvers by nature. The preliminary results of Dr. Mitchell's study exceeded everyone's expectations. After 6 weeks, 87% of participants showed measurable improvements in their conditions. The doctor was talking about publishing his findings in medical journals, while Emma was working on a paper about the spring's unique geological properties. I was just happy to see people benefiting from Grandpa's legacy. The grateful smiles from seniors who could now play with their grandchildren without pain meant more to me than any potential profit. But as news of the healing spring spread beyond Pine Hollow, things began to change. First came visitors from neighboring towns, then from Denver, and soon from across state lines. What had started as a community resource was becoming a regional phenomenon. I tried to maintain the original spirit, giving priority to medical cases and locals, but the demand was overwhelming. My simple sign-up sheet became a wait list hundreds of names long. Then came the day I dreaded. A glossy black Escalade pulled up to the springs, and out stepped Uncle John and Cousin Tom, looking terribly out of place in their designer outdoor wear. Well, Uncle John said, surveying the bustling operation with calculating eyes. Looks like the worthless land turned out to be quite valuable after all. Tom circled the main spring area, taking photos with his phone. Quite the little business you've got here, Grease Monkey. Who knew rocks could be so profitable? I explained that we weren't charging anyone. This was a free community service and medical research project. Their blank stares made it clear they couldn't comprehend doing anything without a profit motive. That's charitable. Uncle John said the word like it tasted bad, but clearly there's commercial potential here. I've been talking to our family attorney. We believe there were irregularities in your grandfather's will. And there it was, the thread I'd been half expecting since the spring's reputation began to grow. According to John, Grandpa had always intended the mountain property to be shared among all the grandchildren. The specific bequest to me was a result of undue influence during Grandpa's final days. We're prepared to be reasonable, John said with a fake smile. We'll split the property 3 ways, you, Tom, and Sarah's boy Michael. Fair and square. When I refused, the fake smile disappeared. Don't be difficult, Alex. Our lawyers will eat you alive. A mechanic can't afford the kind of legal battle we're prepared to wage. They left with a final warning that I'd be hearing from their attorneys. Emma found me sitting by the springs afterward, fuming. They can't just take it, can they? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Grandpa's letter makes his intentions clear, but a good lawyer can twist anything. I looked around at what we'd built, the medical station, the lab, the improvements for accessibility. I can't let them turn this into some luxury spa for the rich. The legal threat for my family hung over everything like a storm cloud, but life at the springs continued. Emma and I were working longer hours than ever, trying to complete as much research as possible before any potential legal challenges. Our shared purpose brought us closer, and I found myself falling for her. Her passion for science, her dry wit, the way she genuinely cared about the people visiting the springs. One night, After everyone had gone home, we sat by the largest spring under a sky full of stars. Without planning to, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching the steam rise into the cool night air. "Whatever happens with your family," Emma said finally, "what we've learned here matters. The data, the improvements we've documented. No one can take that away." I squeezed her hand. "When did you become the optimist in this partnership?" She laughed. "Must be all the healing minerals I've been breathing in." The next day brought another unexpected visitor, a sleek helicopter landing in the only flat area near the springs. The man who emerged introduced himself as Richard Calloway, CEO of Wellness Horizons, one of the largest luxury spa chains in North America. "Impressive operation you've got here," he said, surveying everything with shrewd eyes. "But imagine what it could become with proper investment. World-class facilities, medical staff, luxury accommodations." His proposal was straightforward. Wellness Horizons would buy the property for a substantial sum, enough that I could retire comfortably and develop a high-end healing center. They would reserve some spots for locals at reduced rates, but primarily cater to a wealthy clientele willing to pay premium prices for the Springs healing properties. "Think about it," Calloway said, handing me his card. "This place deserves to be more than a makeshift clinic. We have the resources to make it world famous." When I told Emma about Calloway's offer, her reaction was immediate and fierce. "Absolutely not. They'll commercialize everything, restrict access, destroy the natural environment with construction. These springs have been serving people for generations without resort buildings and $500 per night rooms." Her passion was admirable, but I had to be practical. If my family wins their legal challenge, they'll sell to someone like Calloway anyway. At least his offer includes some access for locals. "Some access?" Emma echoed. "The springs would become a playground for the wealthy, while the people of Pine Hollow get whatever scraps fall from the table." Our first real argument escalated quickly. Emma accused me of selling out. I countered that she was being unrealistic. We both said things we didn't mean, and she stormed off, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandpa's letter. The land knows more than it shows, and about Joseph Running Bear's stories of the mountain spirit that blessed those with good intentions and brought misfortune to exploiters. I thought about the seniors whose lives had improved thanks to the springs, about Dr. Mitchell's genuine excitement over medical potential, about Emma's passionate defense of keeping the springs accessible to all. And I thought about Richard Calloway's vision of a luxury resort and my family's determination to claim a share of the spring's value. By morning, I had my answer. I called Emma and asked her to meet me at the springs. "I'm sorry about yesterday," I said when she arrived, still looking upset. "You were right about the springs needing to remain accessible, but we also need to be practical about protecting them from my family's legal challenge." I outlined my new plan. Establish a nonprofit foundation dedicated to preserving the springs and making them available for medical research and treatment. The foundation would have a board of directors, including medical professionals, community representatives, and scientific researchers, with proper legal structuring. Even if my family manages to claim a share of property, they couldn't easily dismantle the foundation's mission, I explained. And we could accept limited investment for better facilities without turning this into an exclusive resort. Emma's smile grew as I laid out the details. "A healing center rather than a luxury spa," she said, "with sustainable development principles, ongoing research, and priority access for medical cases." "Exactly. We need proper buildings, of course. A real clinic to replace Dr. Mitchell's trailer, proper changing facilities, maybe some simple cabins for patients who need extended treatment. But everything designed to minimize environmental impact and preserve the natural character of the springs." Emma's excitement was contagious. We could incorporate Joseph's knowledge, too, the traditional understanding of which springs help with conditions, a blend of modern medicine and traditional wisdom. By the time we finished brainstorming, our earlier argument was forgotten. We had a vision for Eagle Mountain Healing Center that preserved what made the spring special while ensuring they could help as many people as possible. Richard Calloway was understandably disappointed when I declined his offer, but respected my decision. "If you ever change your mind," he said as he boarded his helicopter. "The offer stands." My family, predictably, was less understanding. Uncle John called me every name in the book when I told him about the foundation plan. "You idiot! You're throwing away millions. That land could set up generations of our family." "It already is setting up generations," I countered. "Just not in the way you're thinking." Their lawyer still filed a challenge to Grandpa's will, but our foundation plan gave us leverage they hadn't anticipated. A legal battle that dragged the miracle healing springs into the public. I wouldn't play well for them, especially when our side was about helping people and theirs was clearly about profit. The press coverage of the springs had been growing, with Dr. Mitchell's preliminary findings attracting attention from medical communities across the country. Emma's research was similarly gaining recognition among geologists and environmental scientists. In the midst of all this, Emma and I continued working side by side, our personal relationship deepening along with our professional partnership. What had started as mutual suspicion had transformed into respect, then friendship. And now something more, something neither of us had expected but both welcomed. One evening, as we were finalizing plans for the healing center, our hands touched over the blueprint. Instead of pulling away, Emma intertwined her fingers with mine. Neither of us needed to say anything. The journey we'd shared these past months had brought us to this point naturally, two people with different backgrounds but shared values finding common ground. Turning our vision for Eagle Mountain Healing Center into reality was like rebuilding an engine from scratch, complicated, messy, and requiring a lot more parts than you initially think. But just like fixing an old Chevy, the satisfaction of seeing it all come together made every headache worthwhile. The first challenge was funding. Despite my successful auto shop, I didn't have the kind of capital needed to build even the most basic facilities. Emma suggested we apply for grants from environmental and medical foundations, while Dr. Mitchell reached out to his contacts in the medical research community. Our big break came when a documentary filmmaker visited the springs and produced a short feature about our operation. The film, titled The Healing Mountain, went viral online, catching the attention of a tech billionaire whose mother suffered from the same arthritis that Martha had found relief from at our springs. The day his private jet landed at the small regional airport, Emma and I were nervous wrecks. Jeffrey Chun had made his fortune in sustainable energy and was known for his environmental philanthropy. Still, bringing any major investor into our project felt risky. Chun turned out to be nothing like the slick businessman I'd imagined. He showed up in hiking boots and a flannel shirt, looking more like a trail guide than a billionaire. After spending a day at the springs, talking with patients and studying our preliminary designs, he made us an offer we couldn't refuse. "I'm not interested in owning this place," he explained as we shared coffee by the main spring. "But I believe in what you're doing. My foundation will provide the capital to build your facilities. No equity required, just a seat on your board and a commitment to keep the springs accessible to those who need them most." With Chen's backing, our foundation was officially launched as Crystal Springs Wellness Institute, a name that Emma and I had brainstormed late one night, drawing inspiration from the crystal clear waters of the springs. The name resonated with both the scientific community and the general public, giving us the perfect brand identity. Construction began in early spring, with every decision guided by our dual commitment to healing and environmental preservation. We worked with architects specializing in sustainable development, building facilities that seemed to grow naturally from the mountainside rather than imposing themselves upon it. The main treatment center was constructed with local timber and stone, its large windows capturing the breathtaking mountain views, while solar panels on the south-facing roof provided much of our electricity. We built a series of accessible pathways connecting the various springs, with resting areas and meditation points along the way. Dr. Mitchell's makeshift trailer clinic evolved into a state-of-the-art medical facility where patients could receive both conventional treatments and spring therapy. Emma's field lab became a proper research center, attracting visiting scientists from universities across the country. Throughout it all, Emma and I worked side by side, our professional partnership evolving into something much deeper. Late nights reviewing construction plans often ended with us talking about everything and nothing, discovering shared dreams and values that went far beyond our work at the springs. One evening, As we watched the sunset from what would soon be the observation deck of the main building, Emma surprised me by taking my hand. "Remember when I thought you were just another landowner who would ruin this place?" she said with a smile. I laughed. "To be fair, I thought you were just another uptight scientist who wouldn't let me enjoy my own property." She rested her head on my shoulder, fitting perfectly. I guess we were both wrong. That night, under a sky full of stars, our first kiss felt as natural as breathing, the inevitable next step in a journey that had been leading us to each other all along. The local newspaper ran a feature about Crystal Springs, dubbing us Beauty and the Grease Monkey, a nickname that made Emma roll her eyes but secretly amused us both. The people of Pine Hollow embraced our relationship as enthusiastically as they had our healing center, seeing in us the perfect balance of practical know-how and scientific knowledge. As construction neared completion and our opening date approached, I should have known that my family wouldn't let us celebrate without one last attempt to get their hands on the springs. It started innocuously enough, an email from Tom requesting a tour of the facilities. Against my better judgment, I agreed, figuring he might have finally accepted the situation. Emma was out of town at a geology conference that day, so I showed Tom around myself. He seemed genuinely impressed by what we built, asking thoughtful questions about the treatments and research. "I misjudged you, cousin," he said as we stood by the main spring. "You've created something special here." For a brief moment, I felt the possibility of family reconciliation, until Tom revealed his true purpose. "I have a business proposition for you," he said, his tone shifting from appreciative to calculating. "Uncle John and I are willing to drop our legal challenge if you'll agree to certain changes in the management structure." Their proposal was clever. They weren't asking for ownership of the land anymore, just positions on the board of the foundation, and a restructuring that would allow for more commercial development alongside the medical facilities. I declined immediately, but Tom had another play. The next day, Emma received a job offer from a prestigious research institute, one that happened to receive major funding from my uncle's investment firm. The position came with an impressive salary, a substantial research budget, and the freedom to continue her work on the spring's mineral properties. When Emma returned from her conference, she was uncharacteristically quiet. At first, I thought she was just tired from travel, but when we sat down for dinner at my small cabin, which had become our de facto home, she pushed away her food and pulled out the offer letter. "Tom approached me directly at the conference," she explained. "This offer, it's everything I've ever wanted professionally. Full funding, a team of assistants, publication opportunities." My heart sank. I knew how much her research meant to her, how limited our resources at Crystal Springs still were compared to a major institute. I wanted to beg her to stay, but I couldn't bring myself to stand between Emma and her dreams. "You should take it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's an amazing opportunity." Emma studied my face. "Do you want me to go?" "Of course not, but I don't want to be the reason you pass up the chance of a lifetime." She took the letter and slowly tore it in half. Then quarters. "Did you know this institute gets most of its funding from your uncle's firm?" I froze. "No, but I'm not surprised. They don't want me for my research, Alex. They want to separate us and weaken Crystal Springs. Tom made that pretty clear when he implied that once I was gone, you'd be more amenable to their development plans." The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was quickly replaced by anger. My family's willingness to manipulate Emma's career to get what they wanted was a new low. Emma reached across the table and took my hand. Even without the strings attached, I wouldn't have taken it. My place is here with the springs, with the work we're doing together with you. 2 days later, we received notice that Tom had filed a new lawsuit, this time claiming that he had a right to part ownership of Crystal Springs based on a verbal promise Grandpa Henry allegedly made years ago. The timing couldn't have been worse. We were 3 weeks away from our grand opening, with media attention growing and reservations already filling up for our first month of operation. A legal cloud hanging over our ownership could scare away patients and partners alike. Emma and I met with our lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Maya, who specialized in property disputes. Her assessment was encouraging. Even though the case is weak, it could drag on for months, maybe years, she explained. They're not really after legal victory. They're trying to force you into a settlement. As we left Maya's office, Emma suddenly stopped walking. The envelope from your grandfather, the one with the note and the photograph, was there anything else in it? Anything we missed? I thought back to that day after the funeral. Just a letter and the photo. Why? The way your grandfather phrased things, the land knows more than it shows. What if he left more evidence of his intentions? Something we haven't found yet. That night, we spread everything related to Grandpa's bequest on our kitchen table. The envelope, the letter, the photograph, the property deeds. Nothing seemed to offer any new clues. Just as we were about to give up, Emma picked up the photo again and held it to the light. There's something written on the back of this, but it's faded. Using a magnifying glass and adjusting the lighting, we could make out what appeared to be coordinates scribbled in Grandpa's handwriting. The next morning, we hiked to the exact spot indicated by the coordinates, a rocky outcropping overlooking the main springs. After an hour of searching, Emma spotted it. A small metal box wedged between rocks, weathered by years of exposure but still intact. Inside was a waterproof pouch containing a leather-bound journal and a hand-drawn map of the springs with detailed notes. The journal was Grandpa Henry's record of his discoveries over the years, including his first encounter with the healing properties of the springs when they cured his chronic back pain. Most importantly, there was a notarized statement dated just a month before his death, explicitly stating his intention to leave the Eagle Mountain property to me alone, explaining his reasons, and even acknowledging that his decision might upset other family members. The final pages contained something unexpected, a detailed survey showing that the springs were actually more extensive than we'd realized, with several underground sources extending beyond what we'd mapped. "This is it," Maya said when we brought her the journal. This notarized statement clearly documents his intentions. Combined with the specific bequest language in the will, it makes their case extremely weak. 2 days before a court date, Tom's lawyer contacted Maya offering to drop the lawsuit in exchange for a modest settlement. We countered with our own terms. They would drop all claims permanently and publicly acknowledge my full ownership, and in return, we would establish a small educational scholarship in Grandpa Henry's name at the local community college. The grand opening of Crystal Springs Wellness Institute coincided with perfect early summer weather. The media turnout exceeded our expectations, with coverage from national health publications, and even a segment on a popular morning show. Dr. Mitchell presented the findings from his ongoing study, now involving over 200 patients with various conditions. Emma unveiled the first peer-reviewed paper on the spring's unique mineral composition, establishing her reputation in the scientific community. Watching the ribbon-cutting ceremony with Martha and the other seniors from Pine Hollow and places of honor in the front row, I felt a wave of gratitude for everything that had led to this moment. Grandpa's foresight, Emma's expertise, and even my family's opposition, which had ultimately strengthened our resolve. The Institute quickly established itself as a unique hybrid of medical facility, research center, and wellness retreat. We maintained our commitment to accessibility, operating on a sliding scale fee system that ensured no one was turned away due to financial constraints. Throughout these busy months, Emma and I barely had time to nurture our relationship, often falling asleep mid-conversation after exhausting days. Yet somehow, working together toward a shared vision had created a bond stronger than any conventional romance. A month after the opening, I convinced Emma to take a day off, our first in what felt like forever. I woke her at dawn with coffee and a picnic basket, suggesting we hike to one of the more remote springs we hadn't visited in a while. The morning air was crisp as we followed the now familiar trail through the rocks. When we reached the small spring where we'd first argued about the future of property, I asked Emma to close her eyes. "Another surprise?" she asked with a sleepy smile. "Haven't we had enough of those lately?" When she opened her eyes, I was kneeling before her, holding a small box containing a ring made from local silver with tiny blue stones that matched the mineral deposits in the springs. "Emma Winters, you came into my life thinking I was going to ruin these springs, and instead, you helped me transform them into something extraordinary. I can't imagine facing another challenge or celebrating another victory without you by my side." Her eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Before I could even ask the question, she pulled me to my feet and into her arms. "Yes," she whispered against my ear. 1,000 times yes. As we stood there, holding each other in the place where our journey together had begun, I could almost feel Grandpa Henry's approving presence. The worthless land had given me more than I could have ever imagined: purpose, partnership, and a love as clear and healing as the crystal springs themselves. 2 years can change everything. Crystal Springs evolved from a hopeful concept into a nationally recognized wellness destination that defied all expectations. We maintained our core mission of healing and research while building a sustainable operation that supported over 50 full-time staff members, most hired from Pine Hollow and nearby communities. National Geographic featured us in their Sustainable Tourism issue. The American Medical Association published Dr. Mitchell's comprehensive study on the spring's effects on chronic conditions. Emma's research was now required reading in several university geology programs. And my old auto shop, I still owned it, but trusted employees ran the day-to-day operations while I focused on Crystal Springs. The true measure of our success wasn't in magazine features or scientific journals. It was in the stories of healing that filled our guest book: the wheelchair user who walked out after 3 weeks of treatment, the veteran whose PTSD symptoms diminished dramatically, the children with skin conditions who could finally swim without pain or embarrassment. Planning our wedding became the perfect excuse to create the botanical gardens we'd always wanted on the property. Emma designed the space with native plants surrounding a natural pond fed by one of the smaller springs. We set the date for early June, when the mountain wildflowers would be in full bloom. The guest list was an interesting mix: scientists who collaborated with Emma, patients who become friends, the entire population of Pine Hollow, or so it seemed, and Jeffrey Chun, whose initial investment had made everything possible. I hesitated over inviting my family, but Emma suggested we extend olive branches. To my surprise, Aunt Sarah and a few cousins accepted. The ceremony itself was everything we wanted: simple, meaningful, and deeply connected to the land that had brought us together. Emma wore a flowing dress to color the springs at sunrise. I managed not to embarrass myself in my first ever tailored suit. Joseph Running Bear performed a traditional blessing, honoring the mountain's spirit and our commitment to protecting it. The real shock came during the reception. Uncle John and Tom arrived, unannounced and visibly uncomfortable in a natural setting they'd once dismissed as worthless. They stood awkwardly at the edge of the celebration until I approached them. "Didn't think you'd show up," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Uncle John cleared his throat. "We almost didn't, but your aunt convinced me that, well, family should be family, regardless of past disagreements." Tom couldn't quite meet my eyes. "The place looks good. Really good. Nothing like what I imagined when we were fighting over rocks and dirt." It wasn't exactly an apology, but coming from them, it was close enough. I invited them to join the celebration, and to my surprise, they did, accepting glasses of champagne and even making stilted conversation with some of the guests. Later, as Emma and I shared our first dance on the deck overlooking the main spring, she nodded toward my uncle, who was actually laughing at something Dr. Mitchell had said. "Healing waters indeed," she murmured. "Who knew they could mend family rifts too?" As Crystal Springs continued to flourish, we faced our share of challenges. Maintaining the balance between accessibility and sustainability required constant vigilance. There were always developers eyeing our success, proposing expansions that would compromise our principles. But our foundation structure protected us from the worst pressures, allowing us to grow thoughtfully rather than rapidly. Uncle John surprised everyone by becoming one of our most unlikely advocates. After experiencing the spring's effects on his own chronic knee pain, he used his business connections to help us secure additional conservation easements on surrounding lands, creating a buffer zone against future development. Tom took longer to come around, but eventually found his own way to connect with the family legacy. His marketing expertise proved valuable when we launched a line of mineral-rich skincare products based on Emma's research, with proceeds funding treatment scholarships for those who couldn't afford them. The most unexpected change came on a routine morning when Emma rushed into our office, her face a mix of shock and joy. "The test is positive," she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. It took me a moment to understand what she meant, and then I was out of my chair, lifting her into a hug that probably squeezed too tight. After 2 years of marriage, We were going to be parents. The pregnancy transformed our perspective on everything we'd built. Suddenly, Crystal Springs wasn't just about honoring my grandfather's legacy or fulfilling our professional passions. It was about creating a better world for our child and generations beyond. We expanded our educational programs, partnering with schools to teach sustainability and natural sciences. We established a research fellowship in Grandpa Henry's name, bringing promising young scientists to study the springs and share their knowledge globally. 9 months later, our daughter arrived, Catherine Henry Mitchell, named for Emma's grandmother and my grandfather. From her first days, she seemed perfectly at home amid the gentle burble of springs and the hustle of a thriving wellness center. As I watched Emma rock our daughter one evening on the observation deck, with the sun setting over the mountains, I couldn't help but marvel at how thoroughly my life had changed since that hot summer day at Grandpa's funeral. I'd inherited what my family considered worthless land and discovered it contained not only physical treasure, but a purpose that aligned perfectly with who I was. I'd found a partner whose strengths complemented my weaknesses, whose passion matched my practicality. And now we had created a new life who would someday inherit not just property, but values and vision. Joseph Running Bear, now in his mid-90s but still sharp as ever, blessed Catherine in a small ceremony by the main spring. Afterward, he took me aside. "Your grandfather chose wisely," he said, his weathered hand on my shoulder. "The mountain is happy with its caretakers." Sometimes when it's quiet, in those rare moments when the center is closed and our daughter is sleeping, Emma and I soak in the main spring under the stars, just as my grandfather once did. In those moments, I can almost hear him chuckling at how it all turned out, how his seemingly eccentric bequest set in motion a chain of events that created healing ripples extending far beyond these rocky slopes. The land did indeed know more than it showed, and I'm grateful every day that I was patient enough to discover its secrets, stubborn enough to protect them, and lucky enough to find the perfect partner with whom to share them. As for the family that once mocked my worthless inheritance, they finally understand what Grandpa knew all along, that true value isn't measured in dollars, but in lives changed, pain eased, and legacies honored. Some lessons take time to learn, but like the healing waters themselves, they're worth the wait.